Yeah, it's like going back to all this contagion that we've had. Maybe this is where the more hardcore maxis are right, and maybe I haven't paid enough attention to them in terms of, hold your private keys, screw these companies that offer leverage or interest on your loans, screw financial services. I don't personally believe it, but they've been right on certain areas, and maybe I think because we take this very seriously, like we really consider the things that we talk about and the influence it has. Maybe they were right, or maybe this shit just happens anyway. That's what I don't know.
Well, okay, so I mean, the thing is, the thing. Okay, this is why I think it's such an important thing to understand that I believe very strongly markets are efficient. It leads you to a lot of principles that are very important. Like, for example, I believe very strongly that the best way to hold risk, to be compensated adequately for risk that you're holding, is to diversify away the risk, the unilateral risk, right? I diversify it away. So like, I don't know, if there's one taxi company and all of my money is in the taxi company, that's a lot of risk. But if there's 10 taxi companies, which one's going to win? I don't know. I'm going to buy a little bit of all of them.
Yeah.
And that means that I'm going to miss out on the biggest gains because I'm going to miss out on Uber. Uber's, rise, but I'm going to get a little bit of it.
And save yourself from the biggest losses.
And I'm going to save myself from the biggest losses. And humans are notoriously bad at remembering that they picked losses. Notoriously bad at it. And I think that's the thing with like Bitcoin is highly volatile. I think the best you can do is either just hold it and just, sit on it and say, this is my investment. But the other thing you can do is you could like volatility trade it, like where you're just buying low, selling high, buying low, selling high, buying low, selling high. Yeah, I got it right.
You got it right.
Yeah. Buying low and selling high. You can do that. Like it's,
But what's low and
volatility.
what's high?
Well, volatility trading allows you to do that essentially algorithmically. Bitcoin's pretty good for like a velocity like strategy. And I do think that's you could get extra returns on like Vanguard, like maybe the Vanguard or the SPYs or something like Vanguard Total Market or the SPYs. But your returns on something like that, doing that instead of 9% per year, you're going to get like 11% per year or 13%, maybe 20% in really good years, right? It's not huge. In Bitcoin and in crypto generally, particularly in DeFi, what was amazing to me is people were looking for these 50% returns, 80% returns, 200% returns. And like Bitcoin early on wasn't any different. It was the same thing. This is how people like Pirate at 40 got their start. They were promising these 1% returns per day and 15% returns per month. And Bitcoin was like, Bitcoiners often, I remember like...
Was that the thing Dan Mercado talked to us about?
It was. I can't remember exactly what. Will you explain what that was?
Pirate at 40? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It was one of, there was a lot of Ponzi's early on in Bitcoin, particularly dealing with miners. But Pirate at 40 was the most interesting. It was this guy named Trendon Shavers, released his own name. He was very public. And he seemed to be doing something legitimate. He was running, he took investment. People gave him X number of Bitcoins. And nobody knew where he was getting the returns. It was speculated that the returns were coming from, lending to like drug markets and stuff like that. And I think ultimately what I have come to conclude is he was probably lending to Mt. Gox. So the returns were coming from, Mt. Gox covering liquidity and maybe some other nefarious things, but that was a large part of it. So Trendon Shavers was returning these massive profits and he was doing it for months and months, and this thing started to grow. He needed more liquidity because they needed more liquidity. And then all of a sudden, I think it was around like August, September of that year, he just doesn't pay out one day. And people wonder what the hell's going on because they know his name. They've met him. They've done steak dinners together. They've met him at conferences. He goes to conferences. Like he's a public guy. So they're all very confused. And he just doesn't pay out. So there's a number of like weird events that happen around this. Matthew N. Wright, who's, not really in the community at this moment. I haven't seen him in years ever since this. Matthew N. Wright, who was actually the owner of Bitcoin Magazine at the time, before they sold it to Tony Galipi. Matthew N. Wright makes a bet with everybody that I think it was like by September 13th or something, Trendon will make a payout. And if he doesn't, I'll pay, I don't remember how much, $10,000, or it might have been 10,000 Bitcoin. It was big. You can actually find the spreadsheet online of all the people that registered to take this bet. He was like, Trendon's going to pay. And if he doesn't, I'll you give you this much. And if I don't pay, you can give me the scammer tag. So this was the way that we monitored ourselves early on in Bitcoin, is in the forums. If you fucked up, you got a scammer tag and nobody would deal with you, right? And you'd have to either remake an account and start basically fresh rebuilding reputation. So he commits himself to this. If I don't pay, you can give me a scammer tag. The date comes around, Trendon doesn't pay, Parrot at 40 doesn't pay. And Matt says to the community, fuck you, I'm not paying you. I was just doing this to show you all how gullible you are. You guys will fall for any scam. And he doesn't pay. And so they give him the scammer tag. He kind of exits the community. This leads to the collapse of the Bitcoin Magazine team at the time. So Bitcoin Magazine's in trouble. Tony Gallippi steps in. Tony Gallippi buys it. And like here we are today, where I think Gallippi has sold it now to like David and that team.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure it was Gallippi. Yeah. And like all of this stuff, like these guys, it's a weird history that only a few people were around to kind of witness. And yeah, so we had early Ponzi's, and Bitcoiners were looking for returns in excess of, the normal market. So they would give money to cloud mining operations. They'd give money to Trendon shavers.
What happened to Trendon?
He went to jail. I think he went to Texarkana, if I recall, the resort jail of jails, federal prison. He was there for a number of months. He got out and immediately started trading shitcoins. Which, I mean, it's what's remarkable about Trendon is that if you look back on it, again, classic Bitcoin story, he probably had 20,000, 15,000 Bitcoins to himself.
If he did sat on his hands.
Because Bitcoin was worth nothing. This is when Bitcoin was like $1.80, 70 cents, maybe less. It was cheap. It was really cheap. Maybe 10, 20,000 Bitcoin. And he does this thing. Oh, and so when he doesn't pay out, no one knows why. And, it causes this like weird, like tons of people that were in his little thing, he tries to pay them out. And that's when it turns into a Ponzi, right? He starts paying them out. With new entrants, it turns into a very classic kind of Ponzi, thinking that the person he's lent to, I believe, this is what he's told. He said he believes the person who he's lent the money to is going to return him the money eventually. So no biggie. Well, he's never made whole, so his investors are never made whole, and he starts paying out some of them with like new investment funds with people that are like waiting.
You found him.
I mean, I found him. I can't find him on like what he's doing right now, but
he was trading shitcoins like pretty quick after he got out. I knew that. But he had a shit ton of coins. And if he lost basically everything when the government showed up and took everything from him, and he goes to jail and he spends a few years there. And if he had done, like, this has been the story of Bitcoin. If you did nothing, you got rich. And again, that goes back to like, you don't deserve this, but if you did nothing, you got rich. If you did something, you lost your coins. It's
so
kind of
true.
a bad message, actually, like in the grand scheme of things, when you think about like an economy. If you do nothing, you'll get rich. If you do something, then like you will give up wealth.
Yeah, but that's not true, because to get to that starting point, you got to do something.
You're 100% right. Like
you've got to mine, or you've got to go to work. You've got to expend energy.
Absolutely,
and choose to make
absolutely. But like it's a pretty minimal thing that anyone had to do in the early days to get rich. And like I don't think that's the case going forward. I don't think that's going to be the case.
Think about the opposite with the fiat currency world, where we're experiencing now quite high inflation, where you've got to do a lot and you can end up with nothing.
Yeah, well,
I prefer a world where you can do nothing and end up with more.
Yeah, everyone wants that. That's the millennial dream right there.
Yeah, but you look at those two extremes. Neither are correct. But there's like an ounce of truth in both of them.
Yeah, and I think that like Bitcoin's early days are not indicative of where it's going to go. I don't think that that's necessarily the case. But it's just interesting to look at the history of Bitcoin and the number of people who spent time in prison for doing things in Bitcoin that are maybe nefarious, wherein the holders themselves, I mean, Mt. Gox is a perfect example. I don't know how many people are going to be made wealthy when the Gox stuff gets paid out.
The forced hodl.
Yeah, where they were forced to hold for, what, 10 years, 8 years? They were forced to hold. And most of them would not have. I know that. You know that.
Everyone knows that.
Everyone knows that. So it doesn't matter what haircut they end up taking. Like there's going to be so many people made wealthy by accidentally like losing their money in Gox in an early bankruptcy. And I don't know that that's a story that's going to be repeated again and again.
Do you look back at the early days of Bitcoin fondly?
Yeah. Yeah, but I look on today's Bitcoin days as fondly as well. Like I look back on the earliest days of Bitcoin fondly because I think that there were very few people recording the history. And I feel like I got to be at the center of it because there were 8 of us, you know, most of us under pseudonyms. Like, I don't know that like even those early guys would know who I was, right, in the forums or in the Skype
Have you ever
conversations.
declared who you were?
To some I've talked to them about it. Like, oh my God, that was you. So like, you know, and it's not a big secret. It's just kind of like early on, you know, I was an anarchist. I thought we were overthrowing the government. You know, got to do it secret, like, you know. So I think there was very few people recording history. I didn't like write it down until Bitcoin Uncensored. We really did like do kind of a weekly brief on the history of Bitcoin, which is kind of awesome because like it perfectly encapsulates that time. And I think we basically got a cycle in, a pump cycle. So that's really an important like period because people can listen to that now every pump cycle and kind of realize that every single time it's the same. It's the same shit every goddamn time. But that was a time when we recorded history. So there's a lot of history that like I've lost in my memory. I'm sure that when you listen to Bitcoin Uncensored, it's like very detailed. But the early history, there just wasn't a lot of people. And you know, we were geeks living in our mom's basements or, you know, sitting in our living rooms, unmarried, getting broken up with by our girlfriends who thought we were nutters. And they're just the history. It was slow. I mean, like for us, if we saw an article in any sort of newspaper, anything like a small town newspaper talks about Bitcoin, like we thought that like, oh fuck, the price is going to go, it's going to like 10x today. You know, it was just every little movement that it reminds me very much of a parent looking at their child and applauding that they're pooping. Like these are the accomplishments of a neonate. This little child, oh my God, he pooped on his own. Like, I'm so proud of him. Like that was Bitcoin early on. It was, oh my God, it just took its first steps. Oh, and the things that we thought were big deals were not. I remember when Bitcoin Magazine came out, issue number 1, Barnes and Noble put it in some chains. I don't know how many, maybe all of them, but they put like 1 copy in. And I guess it's really fairly easy to get distribution there. Yeah, I don't think they sold it. I don't think they did that again until it's probably there now. But I remember when Barnes and Noble, it was like, this is it. We're in Barnes and Noble. And like you go into Barnes and Noble, there's like 400 magazines on that rack. Like nobody's going to buy it just because it's there. But when they got into Barnes and Noble, it was like the biggest deal in Bitcoin. It was the biggest news in the world. And that was true of like everything. Like every time an exchange was launched, every time it got a little easier to purchase. I remember when Circle launched. Circle, I don't know who they hired, but they inundated Reddit with, this is the most innovative exchange. No one's ever seen anything like it. This is the most exciting thing we've ever seen in Bitcoin. And it was just an exchange. It was just another But I remember even Chris on BU and the other people that were coming to our meetups were just like, they were hyped about Circle. And I remember just sitting there like, it's going to be just the same, guys. It's going to be Coinbase. It's going to be the same thing.
But were there any moments where you thought, okay, this is significant. This is like a significant change. You know, in my Bitcoin lifetime, El Salvador is a significant thing. Whether it works out or not will be seen, or how it works out. But that's a significant thing. What Michael Saylor did is a significant thing. Tesla coming out and buying 1.5 billion of Bitcoin, that's a significant thing.
I find rich people doing rich people things to be completely insignificant in this space. And it's because like when Michael Saylor buys all those coins, he's putting everything on black on maybe a weighted roulette board that generally falls on black. I don't know. When Elon Musk does that, he's the world's richest person. He's like taking a small portion of his wealth. Oh, it's $1 billion. He's taking a small portion of his wealth and putting it in. Rich people make stupid bets all the time. They're idiots. Mark Cuban is an absolute moron. You know, he put his money into Voyager. I mean, I could have told him what was going to happen to these things. Like, I'm afraid of Coinbase. You know, Coinbase gives these loans, and like these leverage kills eventually if it's unmanaged. And maybe Coinbase is managing it, but like we just witnessed numerous companies that didn't manage their leverage. So I'm uninterested in what rich people do. And the moments for me in Bitcoin where I have sort of had that aha moment have always been when impoverished people like El Salvador, perhaps, but I think El Salvador is a bad example of that even. When impoverished people are forced into a position to use this.